Antes de comenzar el episodio, déjenme contarles de nuestro patrocinador Drink Element, que es una bebida de electrolitos que nace de la necesidad de encontrar un producto que llene nuestros requerimientos de hidratación, sin el azúcar, los colorantes y los ingredientes de relleno que normalmente encontramos en las bebidas deportivas. Drink Element está cuidadosamente formulado para proporcionarte un balance perfecto de electrolitos que te va a ayudar a tener un desempeño óptimo en tu actividad física, evitar calambres musculares, el salto del ojo, la taquicardia, la moridera y el apelotardamiento causado por la falta de hidratación o por los niveles insuficientes de sodio, potasio y magnesio que pueden ocurrir de manera natural durante el ejercicio, el consumo de café o el exceso de felicidad por el alcohol. Especial para todos aquellos que hagan una dieta baja en carbohidratos, están endulzados con stevia y tienen un rango de sabores espectaculares como naranja, frambuesa y mango chili, entre otros. Su presentación en sobres individuales los hace ideales para viajar. Solo necesitas una botella de agua y un sobrecito de sales de Element para tener todas las bondades físicas y mentales de un balance perfecto de electrolitos. En un estudio realizado por mí, se encontró que Drink Element es crucial para el manejo de la resaca y el sentimiento de miseria absoluta ocasionado por la deshidratación postchurria. Además de proporcionarme claridad mental y darme el impulso que necesito, tengo que concentrarme en tareas que requieren de toda mi atención. Si quieres ordenar Drink Element y averiguar qué significa esto de la deshidratación postchurria, vete para las notas del episodio y haz clic en el link para hacer tu pedido y a la vez apoyar mi trabajo. Pégale a la sal y disfruta del episodio.
Okay, I have another statement. Another one of those fun statements. A way to maybe perhaps prevent Alzheimer's disease or cognitive decline in general is to keep your brain active with challenging tasks, because a lazy brain is more likely to get it. So get out that lazy brain, go to those crossword puzzles and Sudokus, otherwise Alzheimer's. So what do you think about that?
So I think there's nothing wrong with keeping your brain active and with doing puzzles, learning a new language, learning a musical instrument, and any type of new task you're going to learn helps make new connections in the brain. But plenty of people, like very intelligent, hardworking thinkers, get Alzheimer's disease. We have people with PhDs. We have expert, very intelligent people who are not sitting around watching TV all day.
Those are not lazy brains.
Exactly. These people are not lazy. They don't have lazy brains. They're doing brilliant research all the time. So I really don't think that's the problem in Alzheimer's. And here's the thing. This is a relatively new illness, right? It's not, it existed in the past, but it was very rare. It's very rare. Now, just like type 2 diabetes, just like obesity, just like cardiovascular disease, hypertension, all of these other modern diseases, they always existed, even hundreds or thousands of years ago, but they were very, very rare. Now they're exploding in incidence, and here's something that I really like. It's really important for people to know. When we think about, if your listeners know a little bit even about low carb and ketogenic diets and the harms of the modern diet that's so high in sugar and so high in refined carbohydrate, there's no part of the body that is not negatively affected when when your blood sugar and your insulin are high all the time. The entire body, right? We know with type 2 diabetes, or even if you don't have type 2 diabetes, even though they call Alzheimer's type 3 diabetes, the problem is not always your blood sugar. The problem is insulin. There are millions of people out there who have a normal blood sugar level, but their blood sugar is only normal because very high insulin is keeping the blood sugar normal. But in so many people, the high insulin, even with normal sugar, the high insulin is a major factor in driving so many illnesses people live with now. PCOS, hypertension, high blood pressure, gout. In a lot of men, it's erectile dysfunction. Growth of enlarged prostate gland. So many things, skin tags, so many things come from this, even if you don't have diabetes. There is no part of the body that is not affected poorly by this. The kidneys, the eyes, the skin, the ovaries, the liver, the blood vessels, the heart. Why would we think the brain is spared? Why would we think that for some reason the brain is protected against all this other bad stuff happening from the terrible diet that most of us grew up on and maybe still eat right now?
Absolutely.
The brain is not protected, and like I said, there's a lot we don't know. Nobody ignores the fact now that diet is a primary cause, or poor diet is a primary cause of cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, obesity, all these things. Why do we ignore that it's probably also a major cause of Alzheimer's disease? Why do we pretend like the brain is not susceptible to all this same harm that comes to the rest of the body?
And what really upsets me about this is that, as you said, this is not a new thing. However, I don't want to be a conspiracy theorist. I don't like that. But as I think about this, there is no real profit if you tell people that by changing lifestyle they are going to get better. And there is a lot more profit in the pharmaceutical approach, which hasn't proven to be effective to this moment. Ugh. Now, let's talk about a little bit about what doctors know versus what doctors are supposed to know. Because I have a problem with that part. I mean, like, I know doctors, and they have all my respect, but sometimes when it comes to these topics and when it comes to this kind of knowledge of something that is not new, they just look like flabbergasted, like what are you talking about? What is this thing? What is this? What sort of sorcery is this? And they look at me. I'm annoying per se because I look like I joined a freaking cult.
I think there's two things with regard to diet in general and how nutrition and food affect the whole body, including the brain. Doctors just don't get educated in nutrition. It's not part of medical school. It's not their training is medicine. Their training is drugs. Their training is so it's not really their fault. They just don't receive that education in food, in nutrients, in and I think the other part, specifically with regard to Alzheimer's, is that, and I understand this, like from a doctor's perspective, Alzheimer's seems so complicated and so confusing and so hard to understand. How could it be possible that diet could be either causing it or diet could be the solution? Like that, like how there's no way
simple.
That could be right. Yeah, there's no way that you could help Alzheimer's with a diet. Like, that's crazy. Now, and the thing is, most of the doctors that you and I know and follow online and stuff, all the low carb and ketogenic doctors, none of them learned this in medical school. They all learned it themselves, either through their own health and weight problems. Like there's many doctors that were overweight or obese. Medical professionals that couldn't control their own weight because they didn't have the right knowledge. Or maybe they had diabetes, maybe they had heart disease, maybe they had some other problem. They had to learn it on their own to heal themselves. Or some of them didn't have any personal health problems, but they saw patients getting much better on low carb or ketogenic diets, and they said, hey, what are you doing? It's working so well. And I wish more doctors would do that, because most doctors ignore and they just say, well, wow, that's working, keep doing it. They're not curious enough to say,
they are not
teach
curious.
me what you're doing so I can teach all my other patients.
Exactly. And many of them, I mean, the gods bless them, but they don't have time either. I mean, they have like eternal shifts, and then they have to go home, and then they have families and children, dogs, and whatever. But however, I remember when I started the diet, and I was a butter chugger. I mean, like, I started with the full high fat. I'm gonna have all creams and cheeses and then of course I had my lipids done, and he just told me, you have the cholesterol of a truck driver. what is happening here? And I was like, yeah, it's a little high. I changed my diet. And he was like, if you don't change it back, I'm gonna put you on statins.
Mhm.
And that was it. That was it. He was not curious. He was not like, he didn't ask why have you having migraines or whatever. Not at all. Not at all. So the lack of curiosity can be condemned at certain point. I don't think I am the one to do it, but goddamn.
It's a big problem. It's a big problem because people need help and they're not getting it from their doctors.
They are not getting it from the doctors. That is very sad. That is very sad. And many people think that only from the doctor can you get that kind of help. Most people think so.
Yeah.
Okay. I have another I have another one. And it has to do with the pharmaceutical approach. Can you please explain to my audience and to me what amyloid beta plaques are?
Okay, so this is going to be a little complicated. I'll try to explain, simply, but some people think that this beta amyloid stuff is the cause of Alzheimer's. There's a different approach that I subscribe to that doesn't agree with that. So amyloid is a type of protein that everybody's brain produces this, not just Alzheimer's. Everybody's brain makes it. The problem in Alzheimer's is that this stuff builds up. The amyloid comes out of the cell and it's supposed to be cleared away in a timely manner. When it's not cleared away, it builds up and it just stays there. And when it builds up and stays there, it kind of mixes in with itself and links upon itself, forming what we call the amyloid plaques. And these are just big fragments of protein that block the neuron's ability to communicate with each other. It blocks the signals from coming out of these cells to talk to each other, which is how healthy cognition happens. And the problem, though, like I said, the problem is not the fact that this amyloid exists. It exists in everybody. The problem in Alzheimer's disease is that it's not being cleared away, so it's staying there and it's building up and making all these plaques. And one of the things that seems to impair the clearance of this amyloid is chronically high insulin. Yeah, and I remember I said they call this disease type 3 diabetes, but even if they always diagnose type 2 diabetes through your blood sugar. Even if your blood sugar is normal, if you have very high insulin all the time, this is going to be a problem for you, because the enzyme, the thing that clears away this amyloid stuff, the garbage crew, the sanitation crew that clears it away, is the same enzyme, the same sanitation crew that clears away insulin. And if you have a lot of insulin circulating all the time, this enzyme is too busy dealing with all the insulin and it leaves behind the amyloid to build up. And, most people eating the modern diet that's so high in carbs do have high insulin, let's say most of the time. And the reason nobody knows is because nobody tests insulin. You can have your fasting insulin level measured at a doctor's office or a lab. You can have an insulin level measured after you eat. You have to be at a lab to do it, but everybody measures glucose when I don't know if it's Germany or in the Spanish-speaking world, but when you go for a checkup, they check your fasting glucose. Sometimes they'll check your hemoglobin A1C. Those are only measures of glucose. They never look at insulin. This is why we have millions of people who are not diagnosed with diabetes
or pre-diabetes,
diabetes or pre-diabetes, but because their blood sugar is perfectly normal, but they have obesity, they have gout, they have high blood pressure, they have skin tags, they have PCOS, they have a fatty liver, they have migraines. I mean, there's so many things that come from this problem that nobody knows because nobody is looking at insulin levels. But again, the doctors are not trained in this. They just don't know.
And that sucks, because if you are feeling like crap, if you are having all kinds of problems, when you go to the doctor and they tell you, no, your sugar is normal. Okay, go home. Oh, well, exactly. Look at that. My sugar is normal.
Exactly.
Oh, son of a bitch.
Exactly. Well, it's a very common thing to have that normal sugar but high insulin. Very common.
Oh man. And okay, you said that you subscribe to another kind of thought about
Right.
amyloid plaques, right?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
Right. No, yeah, thanks for reminding me. There's another perspective on this, that we believe the amyloid is actually protective. Amyloid is secreted by neurons that are under duress or under stress. We see a lot of amyloid being secreted in the brain in a traumatic brain injury because it seems to help protect the brain. It's kind of complicated, but it helps regenerate protective substances. It may even have antioxidant functions. And what was I going to say? Wait, I just lost my train of thought.
No! It's about it being protective.
Oh, right. One of the things amyloid does is, like, biochemically at the molecular level, it shifts glucose away from being burned for energy and toward other pathways that can generate compounds that help rebuild and restore these cells.
Wow.
So that looks bad for amyloid, right? Oh my gosh, if the problem in Alzheimer's is that we're not burning enough glucose and the cells are starving for fuel, well, then if this amyloid is interfering with that process, then amyloid's a problem. Except this would not be a problem if you had some other fuel. If amyloid is reducing the burning of glucose and sending it toward these protective, helpful, restorative things, then it's only a problem if there's no other fuel available. Now your brain cells have nothing to use for energy. But if some of that glucose is being used for these protective pathways, but you have an alternative fuel, let's say you have some ketones available, now we can send the glucose toward this protection, toward restoring and repairing, and we can use ketones for the energy. The problem is, when you have high insulin, you do not produce ketones. We only make a lot. Now, you'll make a teeny tiny amount of ketones all the time, almost
maybe at night.
Yeah, usually overnight, or sometimes they'll just be a teeny tiny amount, just that it's not measurable really with the technology we have. But in general, we only produce a significant level of ketones when the insulin is low. So if you are somebody that eats a very high carb diet and your insulin is high most of the time, you're never going to be making enough ketones to fuel the brain. So now the brain is not using glucose, but there's nothing else. There's no other fuel.
There's no other thing. It shuts down.
Yeah. And before I forget though, because you were talking about the pharmaceutical approach with the amyloid.
Yeah. I forgot.
Yeah. Most of the drugs developed for Alzheimer's are what they call anti-amyloid drugs. They're drugs that are designed to reduce the formation of this amyloid or to get rid of it once it's already formed. Every single one of these drugs has been a failure. They have failed in that they don't make the Alzheimer's any better. They don't improve it. In fact, research on one of these drugs had to be stopped early because the people on the drug were doing so much worse than the people on the placebo. Getting rid of the amyloid was making these people worse, which suggests also that amyloid is probably doing something beneficial.
That's when they realized that maybe it's protecting.
I still don't think they have realized it. That's kind of an alternative theory. The mainstream conventional approach still is going after this amyloid. There have been numerous drugs, probably 4 or 5 of these drugs, if not more, and every single one of them is not. It does nothing. So
and how long have they been used as standard of care for Alzheimer's disease?
That's a good question. I don't know. Probably at least 20 years, if not more.
Oh, no.
Sure.
What?
Like I said, I'm not sure. Don't quote me on that. But they're not new. This is the first thing they tried. I mean, because they've always thought that the buildup of these plaques is causing the disease. So why wouldn't the number one drug target be to reduce these plaques? But it has not worked. It has never worked.
But Amy, tell us, how can we get ketones naturally? How can we get ramp up that ketone production to counteract this craziness going on in the brain, or to prevent it, or to treat it once it has already started? Maybe not cure it, but help it.
Right, right. And just so people understand, like I said earlier, the research is in the early stage. I can't say that this is not a cure for Alzheimer's disease. I'm a nutritionist. I'm not even allowed to use the word treat. All I can say is that giving the brain some fuel in the form of ketones helps make up for that energy shortage it's having because it can't use glucose. Looking at Alzheimer's disease as a metabolic problem, and metabolic means it has to do with energy. If this is an energy shortage in the brain, then the number one most important thing to do is provide energy in some form that the brain can use. And we know that the Alzheimer's brain can use ketones. And there's a ton of research on this, not just in mice, not just in rats, but in humans with Alzheimer's disease. And so how to make ketones, if we need to get ketones to the brain, how are we going to do that? The most effective, well, I shouldn't say most effective, one of the ways to do it is to go on a very, very low carbohydrate or ketogenic diet. Because when your carbohydrate intake is really low, your insulin stays low. And when insulin is very low, you will burn more fat, and burning fat produces ketones. So that's one way to do it. There's a lot of people, especially if you are older and if you already have the disease, it can be really difficult for somebody in that state to stick to a ketogenic diet. If you can't or won't do a ketogenic diet, you can use coconut oil or MCT oil, which those fats are digested differently than other fats, and they more easily convert into ketones. So even if you're eating carbs, if you take MCT oil or coconut oil, you'll have a little bit of ketones.
No way. I didn't know that.
Yeah. It's not, I don't think it's as effective as the diet. And you can also, have you heard of exogenous ketones?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes.
So, that's another way. It's like a ketone supplement. They usually come as a powder that you can mix in water and you drink, and that will also give you ketones. But the thing I need people to understand is that if this disease is coming from, or at least in part coming from, damage done by a poor diet and bad lifestyle habits over years and decades, just giving the ketones from MCT oil or from exogenous ketones is not going to repair that damage. All that's doing is giving you the fuel, which you do need. You do need to give the brain that fuel. But if you actually want to address the problem, address the root cause of the problem, you have to address why this is happening in the first place. And if it's happening because of chronically high insulin, if it's happening, there could be nutrient deficiencies involved. If you have a vitamin B12 deficiency, that can cause dementia or cognitive decline and memory loss. So you have to address that stuff. You can't just give the ketones and expect somebody to get better.
They might. Do they notice any like temporary relief or something like something improves at least temporarily when they take the ketones or the MCT oil?
This is the most promising and encouraging thing about this whole situation. Most people, not all, most people respond at least a little bit. Their cognition and memory is a little bit better.
Wow.
It's usually it's not 100%, but here's the thing. Like I said, if you're only giving the ketones, you're only addressing one issue. What if what they have not done yet is a study of the ketogenic diet on a large group of people. They've done isolated cases, one person here, one person there in different studies, and those people were in a mild state, like mild cognitive impairment, which is the precursor to Alzheimer's, or people in the very early stage. And they do seem to get much better, but it's only one person in each of these studies. The larger studies are always done with the exogenous ketones or with the MCT oil. It's never the diet. How much more powerful, how much better would these people get if we did the diet and the ketones?
That'd be awesome.
It would be, but they don't do it. And I think part of it is, I understand why. I wish it wasn't this way, but in the research world, if they really want to identify what single thing is having this effect, they have to isolate that one variable. So they can't do the diet and the ketones and exercise and brain training, because then they don't know which of how much of the benefit is each of these things responsible for.
Too many variables.
Do them by themselves.
Okay.
That sucks. You know, like that's why.
That's very accurate, but it sucks for the people.
Yeah, but the fact that they're getting, the fact that they're getting any better at all is a miracle.
It's huge.
Because as far as we know, there's no effective treatment for this. So if they're getting even a little bit better, they should be shouting this everywhere.
This bothers me. This bothers me so much.
Si llegaste hasta este momento, espero que hayas disfrutado del video. Por favor, no dudes en darnos un like, suscribirte al canal, hacer clic en la campanita de notificaciones para que te enteres de cuando sacamos nuevos videos. Y si te gustó mucho el video, por favor considera buscar el link en la descripción para Patreon y considera convertirte en uno de nuestros patrocinadores. Autorregúlate es un canal, es un proyecto multilingüe que quiere llevar contenido de buena calidad a diferentes públicos que hablan diferentes idiomas. Si quieres estar envuelto en el proceso y darnos un aporte mensual, vamos a estar súper agradecidos, porque eso es lo que hace posible que nos podamos dedicar a esto. Si no puedes darnos un aporte mensual, pero aún así consideras que lo que estamos haciendo es útil, por favor considera compartir este video con tus amigos o con quien creas que se pueda beneficiar de esta información. Muchas gracias por quedarte. Autorregúlate.